Well, welcome everybody. My name is Kinney, and I'm really glad to be here with all of you. And today, yes, I'm going to be talking about nurturing our creative spirits and living with intention. And I'm going to be sharing some principles from a book I've recently written entitled Doorways to Transformation: Everyday Wisdom for the Creative Soul. The book is really designed to inspire you to live with more freedom, alignment, and authenticity, and also just to help you use everyday moments as portals for your own transformation. Maybe you felt unexpressed in some way in your life, or that you aren't really doing the work that aligns with who you know yourself to be deep down. Or perhaps you've had a dream that you've wanted to pursue for a long time, but have just felt afraid to do so. Or maybe you're just feeling stuck, unsure of how to move forward or how to unlock the creative impulses inside of you. With what I share today, I want to encourage you to dream and really live into the more expansive life that I know is available to you and to all of us. And also provide you just with some tools to help you grow creatively and spiritually. Because ultimately, our creativity is a spiritual path, and it encompasses and touches all areas of our lives. But before I do this, I want to share a little bit about who I am and some of my journey to get here. I'm an author, freelance writer, artist, and teacher. And my creativity has always been grounded in a deep contemplative spiritual practice. It's really the lifeblood of what I do. And I'd say that I see myself as a channel first and foremost for the creative expressions that want to flow through me. My creative work has taken the form of an art career in Los Angeles as a mixed media artist for 12 years and has now transitioned into writing and teaching, which I've been doing for about the past 7 years. And at this point in time, I'd say that I really feel alive and energized by the work I'm doing, and also in sync with the larger purpose that I sense I'm meant to be living on the planet. But it wasn't always this way. For many years, I labored under the expectations of others, ideas of what I should be doing in regards to work, a maybe disbelief in the value of the arts and really what they bring to us as a society. And also, I would say a belief that I was meant to carry burdens that weren't mine. And in fact, prior to becoming an artist and writer, I had a career in social work. As many women are, I was groomed to have caretaking tendencies, even though those tendencies didn't reflect what I truly longed for or what I felt meant to do in the world. I grew up playing a caretaking role in my family of origin, and I was also raised in a religious paradigm that emphasized giving to others to the exclusion of one's own needs. And as a highly sensitive young girl, I really internalized all of these messages. And like many of us, I also internalized bigger societal messages that still encourage women to lose touch with who they are in exchange for taking on the needs of those around them. So, getting to where I am today as a fully expressed creative soul, firmly in step with my life's purpose, was very much a winding road that required me to unlearn old patterns, and also has had a lot of trial and error along the way. But a beginning step for me in discovering the creative soul that lived inside of me was reconnecting with desire. As children, we're innately connected to our desires. But somewhere along the way, I lost touch with that part of myself, as many of us do. And in fact, came to believe that desire was not a legitimate or trustworthy guide. And in its place, this is when external obligations and expectations began to pile up on top of me, pretty much squelching any sense of what actually made me come alive. But we are deeply designed for what we love. And as I began to unpack that truth in relation to my own life, I had to dig pretty far down to uncover and recover desires in me that had laid dormant for a long time. I had to give a lot of energy to questions like what lit me up inside and where did I feel passion and joy? And for a long time, I didn't know the answers to those questions. But over a period of exploration, one of the bigger transitions that resulted from my work of excavating desire was leaving a career in social work to seek out employment in creative industries. And over even more time, eventually leaving jobs in which I did creative work for others to forging my own career as first a fine artist and now a writer. The second influence that was a huge support in helping me discover and live out my creativity in the world were the many aha moments along the way when I discovered that what I had to share was impacting others in a significant way. So, getting encouraging feedback on how things I'd created had inspired someone, whether that was a public art project or something I'd written, or even just the email newsletter that I've been sending out for years, which has really been a very simple way of sharing my work with others. But realizing that living my purpose in the world was positively impacting other people empowered me and gave me fuel to keep on expressing. And this knowledge also helped me to keep embracing visibility, which has historically not been an easy thing for me, but of course, is necessary if we want to empower others with what we create. And third, I'd say that finding supportive communities of other people who had creative dreams of their own provided a lot of nourishment for my own journey of becoming who I'm called to be. I had wonderful experiences living in Los Angeles with the creative community there, and just being around like-minded people was really supportive in helping me start to believe and own the identity of creative person that was inside of me that I'd known was there, but previously had not owned, and certainly not in a way that was visible to others. So finding like-minded people was a way to become, to quote Julia Cameron, one of my favorite authors, believing mirrors to one another. So relationships where you can call forth one another's potential and gifts. I found it's really important to surround yourself with the people who will empower you as you empower them in return. That's made all the difference in my journey. And to quote a life coach who I've long admired named Claire Zammit, we don't become ourselves by ourselves. So supportive community is key, and it's a gift that we can offer each other as women. Hopefully that gives you just a little sense of some of my journey that's led to the creative work I'm doing today. And now I'd love to dive into my book that I mentioned earlier, Doorways to Transformation, Everyday Wisdom for the Creative Soul. I want to share with you some specific ways that you can nurture your creative spirit and really live with intention with the work that you feel called to do in the world. Because ultimately, in addition to crafting the work that is unique to your particular calling, all of us will find the most satisfaction entering into the life we are destined to live and really using our gifts to their fullest. And often, especially as women, I think that we're called to live larger lives than we ever thought possible. So it's to this end that I really want to encourage you today. So the first key that I want to share is recognizing alignment. Recognizing alignment really just means looking for where things are flowing in your life and noticing where is there ease along my path. So this is the opposite of looking for the hardest way possible, which I know we sometimes do. I grew up, as I know many of us may have, under the subtle or sometimes not so subtle influence of American culture and underlying value systems that are summed up really well in certain phrases like no pain, no gain, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and of course, the Protestant work ethic. And I think these forces can sometimes start to make you believe that you need to suffer to succeed. And unless something is difficult or requiring a lot of effort, it's somehow not as valuable. I know I fell prey to those beliefs for a long time. But as I ventured onto this creative path that I've been on for quite a while now, I've really found the exact opposite to be true with finding alignment and our unique place in the world. I found that ease is really a very important hallmark of alignment, as well as flow. So we're well served to pay attention to the places of ease in our lives and, what they might be speaking to us, because they are clues to our true essence. In addition to noticing ease, another practice that helps us to recognize alignment in our lives is the practice of growing still. Because when we grow still, we get greater clarity on our lives. Now, this doesn't have to necessarily mean that you sit and meditate, although it can definitely mean that. But it's really about choosing to do whatever activity helps you to get the most inner clarity. So that could be, riding your bike, taking a walk, cooking, dancing maybe, or just sitting in nature. But I think when we engage in these practices that help calm our minds, we shift our perspective and get clear on our priorities and what really matters. So instead of being controlled by the treadmill of life, we start to dictate the speed of the treadmill. And in this way, the clarity we get from growing still is really a way of taking our power back. It's a chance to unclutter your head from all of the unhelpful voices and the chaos in our very noisy world, and create some space to identify what's most life-giving. So I want to read a short excerpt from my book that connects to this theme. And it's taken from a chapter called Recognizing Alignment. Unfortunately, it's all too easy to become misaligned. We fall prey to others' agendas and start to believe they are our own. We start accepting societal values that don't resonate with our soul's guidance. We become influenced by the subtle expectation of friends and family members that are not consistent with who we really are. Unaware of the power and value inherent in our true calling, we compare ourselves to others, envying a life that isn't ours to live. These are all forces that can deter us from our path. But when we make the decision to live in accordance with our true self, it shows. It is something that becomes palpable. We feel lit up inside, and even on the hard days, we know that the work we are doing is what we are designed to do. So I would encourage you to pay attention to the places of ease in your life. To practice growing still so you can help just declutter your head and tune into your internal guidance. And ask yourself, where do I feel lit up inside? And embrace these feelings as an indicator of your core essence. So that includes just paying attention to the settings or the kinds of work, relationships where you feel the most energy, and spend some time thinking about how you can incorporate more of those things into your life. And these practices will naturally lead you to experiencing greater alignment. The next key is discovering and embracing your unique voice. So this is a quote from a chapter entitled Finding Your Voice, and it's by a woman named Deborah Silverman. Each one of us has the power to create an energetic vibrancy through our personal expression that impacts everything. That's how we begin to change the world. We heal one person at a time, and we start with ourselves. A large part of living with intention in the world and nurturing our creativity is knowing your own unique voice and daring to express it. So how do we do this? So often our own voice gets covered by the voices of those around us, or by our own doubt or insecurities, or maybe our fears of how people will or won't respond to what we have to say. So one way we find our true voice is by paying attention to our Dharma. And our Dharma is just the place where our own desires and passions, the things that light us up most inside, meet the world's great need. So Dharma is allowing what comes naturally to us to be of service to the world in some way. So as we pay attention to what lights us up inside, as we spoke about a few minutes ago, we can then look for where those things fulfill a need for people. And finding that intersection will give us a clue as to what our unique voice is. And we also just need to explore. A lot of times we won't know ahead of time where our true groove is until we try. I certainly fall into this camp. So even when I began to make art, knowing that at the core of my soul, I was a creative person and meant to express things, I certainly didn't know where that would lead me. And I really didn't even know what kind of art I wanted to make. I had to try like this medium and that medium and then another one and just experiment. And the same process has been true with finding my voice as a writer. So I encourage you to really explore, with whatever creative interests or passions are calling to you. Don't be afraid to just take an initial step towards one of them. And over time, with the process of exploration, you'll automatically get more clarity on, what feels right to you. And I also just want to add that, in the journey to find our voice, it is often difficult to imagine the radical fullness of who we might feel called to become and what our voice is meant to be in the world. We can dream and vision and explore, and those are all important tools. But there's often potential for a larger plan to unfold for our voices that we can't imagine ahead of time. And I've seen this time and time again in my own life and in the lives of others. So it's important to stay open to the largeness of what could transpire and not hold on to limiting beliefs of specific things your voice can become. Because I think this is really a key to expanding into the fullness of our potential. Just holding the awareness that the universe almost always has a grander plan in mind. When you make the choice to find and own your voice, it's where you'll find your power. And I want to share this excerpt to encourage you. Discovering, honing, and sharing your authentic voice is vital work, and there is unfathomable power in speaking the truth that is only yours to speak. It is a power worth cultivating. Welcoming abundance regardless of circumstance. So this is something I wrote in my journal several years ago. Abundance is now, not somewhere in the future. It's waiting for you to simply step into it. Recognizing abundance is really first and foremost an act of being present. And this was really driven home to me during the pandemic. When we were all in lockdown and we're facing all kinds of restrictions with our lives and work. And I was in Mexico, San Miguel de Allende. I've been based here for the past 5 years. And one of the things that really struck me was how the local Mexican people in this small town continued to really just celebrate life. They gathered together, albeit outside, as the weather allowed for that. But they kept connecting and celebrating the present in a way that I'd not seen before. Despite the very real lacks and economic difficulties the pandemic caused, people seem to still find a way to celebrate life now, continue their traditions, and just keep their focus on the gifts of the present moment. And this was such a good lesson for me as I thought about, what I wanted to write about this idea of abundance. And it drove home to me the importance of focusing on how our needs are being met, despite the challenges we might be facing in our current season of life. Abundance is first and foremost a lens through which we view the world. It's a mindset. And when we are willing to shift our mindset from one of anxiety, fear, lack, to one of gratitude, we can then more easily look for the evidence that supports the deeper truth, that we are being cared for by a loving universe, and that synchronicities are always there to support us along our path, if we can just recognize them. So when we choose to shift our lens and look for the synchronicities that are there to support us, this helps us move into a posture of receptivity. And when we open up to receive, we can see much more clearly just how we're being provided for in the moment and I think that makes it easier to trust that a way will be found, no matter what obstacles we might be facing. So, one question to ask yourself as you practice choosing a mindset of abundance is, what are some ways that my reality reflects an abundant universe? Or try identifying a current circumstance where you're experiencing a sense of lack. And just try viewing the situation through a lens of abundance instead. So ask yourself, how are my needs being met right now, despite the challenges that I'm facing? And as we practice choosing a new lens over and over again, we eventually develop the habit of living with a mindset of abundance. And the good news is, it's something we can return to again and again at each moment of the day, no matter what challenges we might be facing. Navigating change while staying open to the unknown. This is probably one of the most difficult things we encounter when we begin to pursue our dreams or take the journey to become our most authentic selves. And it's also a really key part of nurturing our creative expressions. I lived in Southern California for 12 years. And one of the things I loved to do was sit by the ocean and watch the surfers. There was something so mesmerizing and rhythmic about it for me. And, watching surfers follow the arc of a wave really reminded me of how we experience energetic and life shifts. In order to follow a new inspiration or direction, we have to risk riding a force outside of ourselves, not knowing exactly where it's headed, but trusting its crest and flow. So as we think about navigating transition in our lives, whether that's taking a risk to express a creative impulse that's been brewing inside of us, or making a change in our career, or perhaps we find ourselves in the midst of an unasked for season of change and are just trying to find our way to the other side. But we'll have abundant opportunity to surrender what is familiar. And when we can do this, when we can really allow for things in our inner lives and in our outer world to be undefined, we more easily usher in the new thing or the new expression that wants to be born. Embracing the unknown actually helps us to stop putting limits on what is possible. I faced a major transition when I relocated to Mexico from Los Angeles. And at the same time that I made that transition, I was also moving from an art career to that of a writer. So it was definitely talk about diving into the unknown. And I wrote these thoughts about transition during that period that I want to share with you. Transitions are no easy feat. They challenge us at the core of our being, requiring us to become a lump of clay for a while, not yet here and not yet there. Some days I feel as if I am being forced into a lump of clay, as if there is no other option. Perhaps that is why I've been unable to shake my unsettled feelings and keep trying to define things ahead of schedule. The truth is, I am not good at being a lump of clay. I prefer the defined lines of planning and execution, and would prefer to bypass the gray areas that linger in between. But ever so slowly, necessity is teaching me that it is okay to be not yet formed. Even though this grates against my nature, in reality, I know that any passage from one thing to the next requires a period of venturing into the unknown. To cross its threshold, we must surrender what is familiar and be willing to journey through the darkness. And the only way out is through. I remind myself once more to enjoy the journey and take comfort in knowing that the calling coming to me isn't in a hurry. Therefore, I don't need to be in a hurry. Pressure subsides as I exhale, allowing myself to more fully surrender to this great unknowing and its incubating darkness. As much as we might grate against periods of the unknown in our lives and in our creative work, we need to remember that in these periods, really profound shifts are occurring underneath. Things related to our own growth, our own transformation, and that these are things of substance that really only reveal themselves over time. So although we may be tempted, I think we're wise to not seek a premature end to periods of transition and change, especially if they're uncomfortable, because we shortchange our own growth. A few things that can help us as we navigate change and enter into periods of not knowing include letting go of a linear mindset. So, accepting the winding nature of our own becoming. It's never a straight line. It's much more a curvy path, and that's okay. And adopting a spirit of healthy detachment. This has been a very helpful practice in navigating my own transitions. So deciding to nurture the seeds of new things, but not dictate how they manifest or show up in the world. And to do that, it helps tremendously to just remain somewhat detached and take more of an observer role of what's forming in your life. And the good news is, no matter how disoriented we might feel during periods of transition, we'll always find our way through to the other side. Transmuting fear into growth and expansion. We all carry fears around our own growth, around what's possible, around moving out of our comfort zone in whatever way we're feeling called. And feeling fear isn't the problem because, fear is such a normal part of what it is to be human. The problem is when we start to believe our fears are the only truth available. That's when our lives start to feel restricted and our potential is limited in unnecessary ways. So a really helpful practice on our soul's journey is to start consciously looking at the more fearful and limiting beliefs that we hold about life and about ourselves that keep us from expressing our creative gifts and moving into new things. Because how we perceive the world will determine really where we allow life to take us. As we begin to really challenge our limiting beliefs and ask if they are actually true, a few things will help us along the way. First, transmuting fear into expansion is intrinsically tied to releasing formulas and instead following our intuition and what feels most life-giving. Creativity at its core is really an intuitive practice. So taking a break from analytical ways of knowing or maybe more formulaic mindsets helps us to not overthink and also really supports us in getting in sync with our own intuitive knowing. And the gift of our intuitive knowing is that it's not directed by fear. Our intuition is anchored in a deeper truth that is there to support our soul's path. Excuse me just a minute, I drink of water. Well, we can also practice trusting in possibility. What's familiar to us is always what will feel safest, whether that's actually true or not. So it can help to remember that fear only ever creates an illusion of safety. As creative souls on the planet, we're meant to grow and evolve. And when we have a willingness to explore and begin to think in terms of possibilities instead of restrictions, we'll naturally embrace more of our potential. And third, we can counter our fears by giving ourselves permission. So permission to dive into what you love, permission to take the baby step that you've been longing to take, or permission to try on something new and see how it feels. And with that, permission to change your mind, knowing that any step you take isn't permanent and you can always change course. This is an excerpt from a chapter that's entitled Riding the Wave. Today, I encourage you to follow what is beckoning, to free your spirit and release your hold on what is familiar and safe. You can't live into the possibilities of your future self if you are clenching too tightly to the past. Dive in. Your unique design is propelling you onward to an adventure you don't want to miss. And finally, I want to share the importance of giving yourself recognition and celebrating your creative successes. This is such an important practice and one that's really easy to overlook. I don't know about you, but it's very easy for me to always be moving on to, the next thing, whatever that is, and not really celebrate just how far I've come or different milestones I've achieved. And we shouldn't wait to recognize only big achievements in our lives. It's really when we affirm and honor our small movements over time that our creative selves really flourish. The practice of recognition is an important way to feed and nourish both our creativity and the work that we feel called to. And celebration offers two distinct gifts that I'd like to highlight. First, it fosters contentment. This is something I wrote in my journal a few years ago. If we never stop to recognize our progress, we will be forever tethered to an unrelenting treadmill of dissatisfaction. It is only in feeling proud of who we are today that we experience lasting contentment in our soul. So celebration helps us to feel satisfied with who we are at this moment in time, even as we continue to grow and evolve. And when we recognize who we are at this particular moment and give ourselves credit for all of the obstacles we've overcome on our path, we really deepen our self-love. And second, celebrating who and what we've become and achieved is a way of owning our power. We make the choice to validate our own creative growth instead of waiting for the outside world to do it for us. This was hugely important for me on my journey of claiming the identity of artist and then of writer, and choosing to do that for myself first. Because it can be really easy to get caught up in wanting someone else's approval or an external stamp of reassurance from an outside source. And sometimes we look for those things to the exclusion of recognizing our own growth. But when we claim our own power, this allows us to validate each step of our journey and who we're becoming, and not be dependent on someone else to give that to us. So I want to encourage you with this passage from a chapter that's entitled Giving Ourselves Recognition. Today, instead of looking for your next growth curve or mountain to climb, try celebrating instead. Affirm yourself for having grasped something unfamiliar, for adapting, for overcoming the latest wrench thrown into your path. Take time to stop and recognize your own evolution in the midst of life's journey. While becoming all we are meant to be, it behooves us to pause and feel satisfied with who and where we are at this moment in time. In validating how much we have overcome, grown, and learned, we gain a fresh appreciation for all that we embody. So I want to ask, how much do you appreciate who you are in the present? I'd challenge you to think of maybe 5 ways that you've grown or things that you have accomplished over the past several months or years, or even over the past few weeks that make you feel especially proud. And write these things down and just let them serve as affirmations to you on your path. If you'd like more encouragement along the lines of what I've shared today, you can find my book on a lot of different websites, including Amazon, IndieBound, and Barnes & Noble. It's also out on audiobook platforms. And I've donated a copy of it to the She Is Me conference as part of their giveaway package. So hopefully one of you will win that. And I'd love to stay in touch, so you can go to my website, KarenKinney.com, to do that. And there you'll find links to my social media, which is at Karen_E_Kinney for both Instagram and Twitter. And on my website, you'll also find a place to sign up for my newsletter. And I share creative updates, every few months with new writing, events, and other creative resources to help you stay inspired on your path. And I also want to share that I offer one-on-one spiritual and creative coaching and guidance sessions. So if that is something that would feel helpful to you in any way, you can email me at Karen@KarenKinney.com. So thank you so much to all of you for joining me today. It's truly been my pleasure to be here. Take care, everybody.